You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaffe.
And me, Danny Denhardt.
And Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
Today I've had this question a number of times, and I think it's worth Jonathan and I sort of addressing and jumping on is, if we move LLMs, will it help or hinder our business? So the example a lot of people have given is Gemini is becoming more and more popular. They started off on ChatGPT, so can we jump from ChatGPT to Gemini? Is it worth it, or is it going to hurt us? What's your take, Jonathan?
I mean, they're all, we've talked about this a lot, that they're all, historically, last couple of years, they're all of a muchness. That you've got Claude, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Gemini, and we've had the question, which one should I use? You and I have that question probably more than any other question. We have that question. And the historical answer has been, well, they're all leapfrogging each other all the time. So if Claude is the best of the three right now, wait 6 weeks and then Gemini will be better, and then wait 6 more weeks and ChatGPT might be better. So there's been a kind of, I think you and I would have both said this time last year, just pick one and go with it. And you can't really get that wrong. It's, whichever one you pick the one that you like and go with it. And anyway, we're all in that early stage of learning. So you can't really do too much damage. I think we're now at the point where there are differences emerging, and people are also starting to feel quite invested in one or the other of them in terms of they've done a lot with it. So there's a lot of data and history there with it. And so this question, almost an anxiety emerges about, am I on the right platform? And what would I do if I wanted to switch? And how will I know? So I think there's some of the things that are driving some of the questions we're getting more recently, Dan. 2026, we've had those questions a little more than maybe we did.
I've seen it a lot more probably in the last 6 weeks, that people are now wondering whether, is it time to switch? Is it effective? If we move, what do we lose? And I think that's something that, let's take the pros and the cons. Some of the pros are there's no switching costs or low switching costs, so it's really easy to do. They're slowly breaking out into specialisms, so actually some are better for some activities, some are better for others. But some of the cons are there's still security issues if you do it. Although it's easy to move, there's security issues. Not everyone leaves at the same time. So some people will be so embedded in ChatGPT they just won't be able to move across to Gemini. Humans hate change. So you know what it's like with employees, they hate change, and change is something that they've just adopted or just got confident with. It takes a lot longer. And talking to different businesses I've seen it recently where a business was started on ChatGPT, went to Gemini, then was like, right, we should try Claude while we're trying this out. And then they've ended up all going back to Gemini. And what that's happened is everyone's in different spots and places. And it's created this really siloed approach to AI as opposed to like a mass adoption. Although I think a lot more businesses will do this over time, I do think by moving a lot of people at once, you're causing a huge ripple through your business. So if everyone's got to move, it's a new tool they have to learn, then they have to use, and then they have to want to share it and then personalize it. So all these things that people overlook, businesses overlook, and business leaders often discount. And yeah, it feels fine and easy, and the cost doesn't change too much. But the way people work and their automations and their services and stuff, once that changes, it has weeks and months worth of impact. So I do think there are both sides of the story to tell.
Yeah, and I wonder, Dan, if the advantage you get from changing is all that much, to be honest. I think that may be in the future, but right now, if your whole business is, let's say you've got everybody on Claude and you want to move them over to Gemini, and there's so much time invested in Claude, I wonder what big advantages you get from moving to a new model that are worth that disruption. And I think this will get even more so the more agentic starts to happen. As organizations start to develop their internal agent work on one of those platforms, then the cost of transition becomes even bigger. And then you might say, well, that therefore puts more pressure on the decision to pick the right one right now, which is true. But I think, I wonder whether the gaps are so big between them that it is worth that transition right now. What do you think?
I can talk for other people I've helped in my journey. I'm very clear that I picked Gemini because I pay for Google Workspace and it does a great job for me. And the gems help me tremendously now. I know how to work them properly. And that's, a source of entertainment for me constantly when I'm editing and putting together the pods and newsletters, etc. What I have found when have used Claude and using Claude is great at going through tokens really quickly. So the cost can be really high with Claude, and you really have to hone it in. So your briefing, your prompt have to be really, really specific and pointed to get the most out of it. ChatGPT, for instance, so many people use it, so many people love it, but they don't like the updates. So I do, myself, I do think that it's probably best now, my recommendation would be, it's probably best now to pick something that you're going to be willing to stick with for about a year, because the tools are separating and they are going into more specific use cases and specialisms. What that does mean is they're showing you their roadmap for probably the next 6 to 12 months, which then means is once we move towards agentic, Google have gone all in on it in the background. They might have deprioritized some of it in Chrome, but they're going all in, and that's been shown. Claude are building the infrastructure for people to build on top. That's something a lot of them are doing with agentic. And ChatGPT have deprioritized it heavily more and more recently because of the fees and how other people just aren't ready for it. So what that suggests to me is if you can see and predict their roadmap, which is fairly easy from the things that they say and the launches that they release, you can then predict what the best tools will be for you. And then you can understand the switching costs. So for me, I would say right now, if you're looking to switch, you probably should switch pretty quickly, but you probably should pick your LLM for the next 12 months and try and stick with it, because the more that you bounce around, the harder it is for everyone. So that's my recommendation, my take, and I wouldn't suggest changing too quickly and too often.
It feels like there might be another pod there down, that bit of advice around which of those models suit what kind of organization. That feels like the subject for another pod. On a personal level, I'd also say increasingly when I'm doing personal work now, I'm actually doing it on 2 platforms at once. So I'll have the same conversation with 2 of the different platforms, see what kind of answers I get. Maybe I'll even cross-reference them with each other as we've talked about. Sometimes that means you forget where you've done it. So but increasing personal overhead in trying to remember which conversations are on which platform, but that's something that I'll deal with.
There's a couple of things that I've noticed when I've used multi-models or I've reprompted, and it's something we've recommended a few weeks back. But something I've noticed more recently is, and it is true, you have to really know your prompt to get the best output. And if you can't write a brief for it, you can't write something that will be, say, 2 to 3 paragraphs of really precise information. I think most people would come in slightly 5 out of 10 for the answer. They wouldn't give it a thumbs up for the answer without really thoughtful interaction. So ChatGPT is much better at the back and forth to understand what you really want, whereas the other tools are a little bit more direct and will give you an answer. They won't necessarily want to gamify it to get you there for a longer period of time. So I would just be mindful of that. And then also, if you want to test things out, obviously company data aside, if you do want to test these things out and you want to use dummy data, there's no reason for you not to do what Jonathan does, is to use the multi tools at once. The only thing I'd recommend if you're doing that is have one in a desktop app and one in a browser or 2 different browsers, because then you won't remember where they took place and you can understand that. But selecting the answer is going to be critically important. So the answer that best suits you possibly might not be the best answer or best outcome. So the one that you like most often isn't the most effective result, the most effective answer. It might be playing to the biases or the way that you've asked the question. So just be a little bit mindful when you're playing the different tools up against each other, is you might have inbuilt biases for one tool versus the other, or you might not necessarily choose the right answer or the best answer when something suits your argument that you're trying to put across. And that comes up in workshops all the time.
Yeah, it makes sense. One thing you can do, of course, with the prompting, Dan, as we've talked about before, is if you're not sure early on, you kind of write your prompt. You can either ask the AI to check your prompt, say, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is the prompt I'm writing. Tell me whether that's the right prompt, or ask me questions until you understand. Or you can actually get it to write the prompt again. You can say, this is what I'm trying to achieve. I want you to ask me some questions until you understand completely what it is I'm trying to achieve. and then I want you to suggest what the prompt should be. So this one of my favorite themes of AI, as you know, Dan, is this. It's the first tool in history where if you don't know what to do, you can ask it and it will tell you. And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about the LLM tools that we're using at the moment. Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and all the rest of them. Really, really good.
I think that's a great place to give people the top takeaway. And I do, if that's one thing I say to everyone, that is the one thing I say is, if you're unsure, ask it and get it to have a conversation with you until you know exactly what you want to ask and what the output you want is.
Exactly. Good to see you, my friend. And I will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.